When, after ages and ages, you finally reach the telltale world of truly high ground, where the chilled air smells of pine sap and the vegetation is gnarled and tough and wind-bent and pushed through the mountain's open pinnacle, you are alas past caring. You sprawl face down on a sloping pavement of gneiss, pressed into the rock by the weight of your pack, and lie there for some minutes, reflecting in a distant, out-of-body way that you have never before looked this closely at lichen, not in fact looked this closely at anything in the natural world since you were 4 years old and you had your first magnifying glass. Finally, with a weary puff, you roll over, unhook yourself from your pack, struggle to your feet, and realize, again in a remote, light-headed, curiously not their way, that the view is sensational. A boundless vista of wooded mountains unmarked by human hand, marching off in every direction. This really could be heaven. 2 a.m. I am awake and using an indoor toilet for what will be the last time in 15 hours. I'm at the trailhead for Long's Peak, which is in Estes Park, Colorado. We've been sleeping in a tent for the better part of a week, and the sleep the night before was not very good. It was filled with stress dreams and tossing and turning and staring up at the ceiling, watching the bugs fly around. You see, we were getting ready to climb our very first 14,000 foot mountain, or 14er as we like to call them. Long's Peak. The trip will be 15 miles in total and about 5,000 feet in elevation gain. It isn't the hardest 14,000 foot mountain to climb, but it's definitely not the easiest because the last mile gains about 3,000. No, it doesn't. I lied about that. Because the last mile has 1,000 feet in elevation gain, but it also contains some of the trickier moves of getting up the mountain. I set out. Headlamp in place and only a slight trepidation as to what may come, and I walked. We, Mr. K and I, spoke loudly to each other as to deter any bears from wandering in our path trying to figure out what the noise was. And we, despite having only a few hours of sleep, were in pretty high spirits. We were excited about what was to come. There's something that you need to understand about this trip, though. It was without a doubt the longest that I had ever walked in one day. I had done 5,000 feet of elevation before when I hiked the Grand Canyon in 2009, but this was just a little bit different. We did a 10-mile hike a couple of days before we did this, and about 3.5 miles in, I had to sit down and cry for a little bit. Why are these old people passing me? We found out later that I have this rare condition where I get incredibly angry when I get incredibly hungry. We call it hangry. I'm sure some of you have heard of that before. But needless to say, I was excited to go. So we trudged on through the darkness, taking step after step after step as we gained elevation. And I mean literally step after step after step as we were gaining elevation. For hours we walked. Finally, at about 5 in the morning, the sun just peeked over the distant ridges and illuminated the path before us and behind us, and we got to see where we were going, but we got to see where we had been. And it was beautiful. We were standing in Boulder Field, and yes, that's exactly how it sounds, a field of boulders. They were huge. They were like as big as cars. They were gigantic. We had to cross all of them because we had finally reached the beginning of the end. Now, I say the beginning of the end because everything up until that point had just been walking and stepping up on stairs after stair after stair after stair. The reason that Long's Peak is so difficult is because of the last mile. And it's something that I didn't necessarily research into very much, but my husband had done a lot of research and he knew the path by heart and he knew what was really going to be required of us to get all the way up to the peak. But unfortunately for me, it was a little bit more difficult than I thought it was going to be. So, why am I talking about this? Well, we were asked to tell a story about a journey that we had, real or imaginary, and how it changed our lives or how it impacted us. And I think that this journey that I went on impacted me greater than anything else that I had done. I've been to Puerto Rico, I've been to New Zealand, I've been to the Philippines for an entire month. But it was this journey that made me realize who I was and what I was capable of doing. It was in this last mile that I realized where I could go. So, we get to the keyhole. We cross through it, and it is this breathtaking view. It's beautiful, it's amazing, it's indescribable. And it's also windy. It's freaking windy. There's no eloquent or nice way to put it. It is just freaking crazy windy. So we get through it and I just don't know. I don't know if I can make it. I look over at what we're going to be climbing across and it's terrifying. It's this part called the ledges and it really is. You're walking just on a ledge and there's no path. You have these nice marked picture or bullseyes. You have these nice marked bullseyes that you can follow along, but you still have to pick your way across. But finally, after a little cajoling, Mr. K said, "You can do this, Carly. You got this." And so we start making our way along, and we make our way through the ledges, and it's fine. And it's not as terrifying as it looks. I like to rock climb, so it ended up coming in handy that we did this. But then we make it to what is called the trough, or as I like to call it, never mind, I can't say what I like to call it. Not for school ears. So we're going up this trough, and it is full of giant rocks that you have to scramble over. And I enjoy doing some scrambling, but when you're at 13,000 feet, your lungs feel like they're about to explode. And along the way, you also have these tiny little pebbles that get under your feet. And instead of taking one step forward and then another step forward, you take one step forward and then about a half a step back. It's ridiculous. It's outrageous. It's unbelievable. So we're going through this section and finally we make it all the way up to the top. And I'm sitting there and I'm looking down on what I've accomplished. And I realize that I'm still not there yet. So we hop over the edge and we look over this section and we're on what is called the Narrows. I thought it was windy when we popped through the keyhole, but boy was I wrong. Because I didn't understand what windy meant until I hopped over the ledge that led over to the Narrows. The Narrows are kind of terrifying. I had a little bit of a hard time moving on at first, but we make it through. And we cross, and we get to what is called the home stretch. The home stretch is exactly as it sounds. It's that last little bit of rock that you have to defeat before you get to the summit. The home stretch looks like a straight climb. It's a little scary. So I start making my way up and I'm climbing. And it's like climbing a big giant ladder, but the rungs are all at different heights. Oh, and there's a little bit of ice on it too, by the way. Yeah, that was fun. So we're climbing. And I'm exhausted because by the time we get here, we had slowed down so much because of the elevation. We were tired. And I get up to there and I finally reach the peak. And just like it said in the book, I lay there, dead to the world. I don't care about what I had just done. All I cared about was the fact that I had finally made it and I can stop moving for just a little bit. But then I stand up and I look out at everything that's surrounding me. And I'm the tallest thing there. We're on this 14,000-foot mountain surrounded by mountains that are not nearly as tall. And I see just how beautiful this world is that I live in. I see the streams and the mountains and the trees and the sky, and it's beautiful. And I look out and I can see where I've come from. I realize that I did it. I made it. I climbed it. Yeah! Yeah! And that was my journey. And that was my motivation. When I think that I can't do something, I remember you climbed a relatively hard mountain with little to no sleep. Go back! Go back! Where'd you go? Oh, sorry, Sable. It's my puppy. Yes! We have now most difficult mountain to climb that's ever practiced.